I'm Robin Hattersley, Editor-in-Chief of Campus Safety. Welcome to the show. With the recent increase in gun violence and mass shootings, security practitioners responsible for protecting schools, colleges, hospitals, and special events are turning to technology to help them to detect weapons such as guns and knives, as well as other threat objects. CEIA USA recently launched OPENGATE, a groundbreaking weapons detection system designed for the automatic screening of people, including their backpacks and bags, for the detection of mass casualty metal threats, such as high-caliber assault weapons and improvised explosive devices. In this interview, I chatted with Tom McDermott, CEIA's School Safety and Security National Sales Manager, about OPENGATE, why it's different from traditional metal detectors, and how it can help your school better detect weapons coming onto your campus or to your event. He also discusses some practices campuses can adopt to improve their overall weapon screening processes. So with that, here's my interview with Tom McDermott. Enjoy the show. So Tom, what's different about OPENGATE compared to your other traditional detectors?
The OPENGATE was designed really for what we call throughput, to get people transiting a lot faster than historically. With most detectors, you see a lot of what we call nuisance alarms. They're not false alarms because it's still alarming on metal, but it's alarming on innocuous items like a water bottle or a cell phone. Now we've been able to have cell phone free settings for years on many of our detectors, but still a lot of people have other things that might set it off that aren't weapons, but are innocuous. And for larger venues that have a lot of traffic, like an NFL stadium or a Disney or Universal, all of those nuisance alarms really cause people to back up. And what that also does is change the screening procedure, because if you alarm on something, we've all been through it. Well, take everything out of your pocket, and they hold you up, and then we call that kind of yo-yoing people through. You have to stop, step back, take more out of your purse or whatever, go back through, and you're holding up the whole line for something silly that maybe you forgot in your purse or whatever. So we wanted to have that work a lot faster and a lot less nuisance alarms. So that's the main difference. So because of that, we can now get about 2,000 to 2,500 people through a single detector through the screening process in an hour, where historically with a traditional detector, it's about 500 to 700 an hour roughly, because you got to take everything out. So now I can walk through the backpack full of stuff or purse full of stuff, and I'm not going to have those alarms, but it's going to find the weapon. Okay.
So it'll find things like guns and knives and things like that?
Correct.
Wow, yep. That's great.
Yeah. So that's its main reason. The other is portability and flexibility. So now we don't have that crossbar, and there's just two poles. So each tower weighs about 25 pounds without the batteries in it. So they're really flexible. Throw it in the back of a car, literally the back of a car, even in a sedan, drop the seats down, put it through the trunk, which I often do. For this conference I'm at, that's exactly what I did. Very portable, can take them from the school to the school dance, to the football game, to a school board meeting, sadly, because a lot of those are getting out of hand. So the portability and flexibility make the return on investment significantly higher, instead of having that sunk asset cost at the front of the building, wherever that is. Now I can repurpose them, and I don't have that. So it gives people a lot more flexibility.
So can you detect things like vape pens?
We can, although it's a discussion we need to have, because to me, it's like, is that really a threat? It's a policy, but because what's going to happen then, if I have to tighten up security that tight, well, then I am going to start alarming on more things for sure. So if we raise that threshold, and I'm only looking for what we call a mass casualty weapon, so certainly a gun, right, more than a single shot, and more of a tactical knife, a knife that's actually designed for killing, versus a Swiss Army knife, or again, a vape pen. If you want to be able to catch those smaller items, I'm going to alarm on a lot more things, and I'm back to that where I can't carry a backpack full of stuff. So there's always that trade-off. And that's a conversation I have with schools all the time. It's a conversation we have with the NFL when we're doing the design with them is, do you want to catch knives? And about half of them were like, well, yeah, we got to catch knives. Well, what size? And some are like, well, a Swiss Army knife. But well, first of all, it's not a mass casualty, threat then, but also you have a steakhouse inside of the stadium. I can go grab I don't even have to eat there. I can just walk through and grab one off the table. It's the same with schools. We got to balance, what are we really looking for? But also it's a staffing issue. Am I going to have to look through everyone's bag just to find that one vape pen? There's other technologies, other things you can do. So staffing's a concern, other things. You have to weigh those things with security all the time. And so for me, I would tell people in most cases, don't worry about the vape pen. Use other tools to find the vape pen. Use social media. Use just social engineering to see who's using it and have see something, say something, things like that. To use detectors for that, to me, is not a good use of either the detector itself or the staffing. I think there's a better use for that. But we have it can detect it if that's what you want to do, for sure.
Okay, what about students with their Chromebooks, laptops? I mean, we adults we're used to going through the airport. Where you have to take out your laptop or your Chromebook or your tablet. Do students have to do that as well?
Yeah, and the reason being is depending on the setting, of course. But most schools want to at least catch a standard handgun. So for that size setting, if I want to catch a handgun and knives, well, I'm going to alarm on the notebook or the Chromebook. And the reason being, I don't have one here to show you, but I'll just use my phone. On the seam where the hinge is, for that hinge to open and close a gazillion times for that durability, people don't realize, even though the laptop or the Chromebook is plastic, underneath where those hinges are is actually a big piece of metal across the whole spine. Well, that looks like an edge weapon to the detector. So, do you want it to be able to catch a knife that big? Probably, right? So that's why it's going to alarm. If you want to avoid that, well, okay. So if you want Chromebooks to go through, well, then you're going to allow knives that big to go through. So, right. So what we tell people is, look, you can walk through, backpack full of stuff, but the Chromebook's got to come out. And there's really a couple options there. And I've got about 50-50 schools doing it. Some are, the student is handing it off to somebody, a leader there. And as I walk through, they hand it back. Or some have a divesting table. They just slide the Chromebook on at the student themselves and they pick it up on the other side. So it's about 50-50 what schools are doing with that. But yeah, you've got, again, if you want to find the handgun, you want to find certain size knives, you've got to divest the Chromebook or the laptop.
So why is a walkthrough detector better than using a handheld, like one of those wands?
Great question. Human error. The detector isn't going to make a mistake. It just doesn't. Ours done, and they have, by the way, ours are DOJ certified. There's actually a division within the DOJ, the National Institute of Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice, that actually certifies metal detectors. Not all detector companies use it, but we certify, which means depending on your setting, and all of ours use international settings. In the US, it's DOJ. And we have to have certain test pieces for each. Are you looking for an AR-15? Are you looking for a Tech 9? Are you looking for a standard handgun? And there's actually test pieces you have to go through 100% of the time, no matter where you carry it, no matter how you carry it, it has to alarm 100% of the time. So it's always going to alarm. Where human error with a hand wand, you get a lot of alarm fatigue or just human fatigue of air going up and down all day and all this. And perfect example of things that happen is if I hand wand somebody and it alarms on their belt buckle, right? And if I'm in Texas, it's a big old belt buckle. I say, oh, that's your belt buckle. Well, they didn't bother to look behind it because I've got a small gun behind it. Okay, so that's a common problem. People go, oh, it's just your belt buckle. I can tell you a number of stories. At Houston Stadium, I was there doing some work and demoing the new technology. And the security guard came over to me, said, hey, I don't see your badge. I said, well, I'm with Che, I'm working with my engineer. I said, well, you haven't badged in yet. I need to check you. And hand wand, he did the right thing. Hand wanded me, he checked, and I'm standing in front of him, and he put it behind me, and I had two phones, pulled them out of my pocket, and I said, that's what I was alarming on. He said, oh, you're good. I said, well, you're not going to wand me again after I took him out? You're going to check? I purposely asked him, you going to wand me? Nope, you're good. I said, you sure? Because I could have easily had something in the small of my back, but he didn't bother. And that was a manager. And that kind of thing happens all the time where they overlook things. So human error. There's a school district in Charleston. I'm actually at a conference here in South Carolina right now that clears classrooms every day. They do a random kind of in their different schools throughout the district, but just a classroom at a time. And they've been using hand wands to do that, but they know the human error. They know it exists. So they recently just changed it. They went with the OPENGATE so they could just boom, pop them up right outside the classroom. And now kids have to clear that, and they know they're not going to have that human error. If it alerts, they know they've got a potential threat and they've got to mitigate that threat. Now, what they'll do is use a hand wand after that, but now there's a lot less fatigue. So they can go through that with a hand wand as a secondary screening procedure, but not as the primary procedure.
So does your system have a monitor where it shows where the threat item is, like on the person, where the weapon is?
No, and we did do that for a couple reasons on this one. So we actually patented where it lights up in certain sections. We patented that many years ago, and whether it's NFL or lots of stadiums or TSA, it does show you where on the body that alert happened. But what we found over the years is that it gave people a false sense of security. Oh, it must be there. Well, there was a threat there, but it doesn't mean there wasn't a threat elsewhere. Okay. And so that's one problem with doing that. So we said is on this version, you know what we're going to do to speed things up and to ensure security is just make it alarm. So if I'm watching the detector myself, I'm watching for the alarm people transit. If it alarms, all my job is, instead of yo-yoing you back and forth through it, say, nope, take more stuff out of your purse, your pocket, whatever. Please, ma'am, step aside over here to secondary screening. And someone is going to ensure that you have nothing in your purse, nothing in your bag, your backpack, or they're hand wanding you to make sure you clear. But I can spend more time with that person now because my nuisance alarm rate is so low. The number of people, it should be like 1 or 2%, of 100, that small number that I should have to go through and check. So it's much easier to do that way than assume I know. And the technologies that are using monitors, although it looks cool, there's a couple problems with it. One is I shouldn't be focused on a monitor. One thing we learn in law enforcement is behavior, right? We're looking for people's behavior. We want to see them. And that's one reason over the years we went to a column style as well. When you have lots of crowd, you always want to be monitoring the crowd, and the columns allow you to do that much easier than the panels. The panels really block your sight, so you want to be watching the crowd. If I'm watching a monitor, someone goes through, I'm not paying attention, okay? So I want to be watching them as they go through instead of a monitor. That's one problem. Two is if I'm watching the monitor and someone alarms, the technology that are using that, by the time it alarms, other people have transited through. While you're watching the monitor, I could have easily passed it off to my buddy behind me, but alarmed on me and not on my buddy. And now he's in the theme park, in the school, or whatever it is, and they're transiting through. We've seen too many areas with that technology where people are much further past the screening. We have stories from theme parks and others and Major League Baseball stadiums where people were way in the park and they had to go chase them down by the time they realized who it was, because it's not the monitor itself, but the computer processing time. We alert in a second, you know exactly who it is. Please, ma'am, step aside. Student, whatever the case may be, step aside. We know exactly who it is. I'm watching you as you're walking through. I'm watching your behavior. Monitors today, the computing processing time is not there, and I should be focused on the crowd, not a monitor. After the fact, now it's different if it alarms, I take a picture of who it alarms on, so I have that and recorded, that's one thing. But watching a monitor to see how it alarms or where it alarms, we think is poor security, to be honest with you. We could have easily integrated, could have done it. We thought about it, and we decided against it.
So you've brought up some really good points here. Is there anything else you want to add?
Really the biggest thing, one of the things we've learned with this as well, really just since this technology has been out the last year, a lot of schools we know over the years, you know, they were apprehensive to do detection. Not that they didn't think they needed it because they looked at it, but they didn't want that prison look, right? That's been a huge thing. They didn't want, as a matter of fact, New York City schools has pushed us to increase the sensitivity in the OPENGATE. When it first came out, we're just a standard handgun and larger knives. They've been using our detection capabilities for 25 plus years because they look for small knives, all kinds of small things in New York City schools is a real problem. They said, please, can you we're being pushed. New York City wants SROs out of the schools, unfortunately, because of everything that's gone on over the years with that. and they're getting complaints that they've had years of complaints where their schools look like prisons, right? SROs are only the black and brown schools, and they look like prisons. So they like the fact now it doesn't look like that, very different columns, but now you can actually put fabric sleeves on them. So actually put school colors on them and things like that. So it doesn't look like your traditional detector. So that's one thing. The other thing is what most schools are doing is they're now using them more in a pop-up situation. Like I said, outside of, a school bus, or at a football game. I don't have them fixed in position. Some are not even having them at the front of the school. They're using them more as a deterrent in a random situation. And because of that portability and flexibility, it's really easy to do. Think of it almost like a DUI checkpoint, where people don't know when it's going to happen, and all of a sudden it's there. And it's amazing. You watch what happened, and some kids, as they're walking, they see it, and they go the other way. And it's amazing. The first time it happens, you find stuff in the bushes, you find drugs, you find all kinds of things in the bushes and the trash cans. But a lot of schools like the idea of just that pop-up and that random screening, like Charleston County Schools are doing, Hillsborough County and Tampa. They have a regular schedule to clear a high school at a time, but the kids never know when that's going to happen. So some schools want to stay away from that screening every morning. So that pop-up we're seeing that a lot more.
I've heard that from other school districts as well, and is that the random approach really is way more effective, because if you have a certain procedure that happens all the time, people have a way of circumventing it.
That's exactly right.
Figure a way around it.
That's right. And one of them is someone left the door open, right? Which is a common problem, right? But if you do that random screening in a classroom or just at a dance, whatever it is, they don't know when it's going to happen. Yep.
Right. Well, thank you so much. And where can we find CEIA?
Well, many of the conferences, of course, we're going to be at the NASRO Campus Safety Conference, NASRO Conference. We're at all, but we're at Campus Safety East, Texas, and West this year. So we're going to be at all of them. But CEIA-USA.com, you can find information. But you can also find us at most of the Campus Safety conferences. Yep.
Tom, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks, Robin. Take care.